All right. Well, thanks everyone for taking the time out of your morning to join the ULCT as well as the Kempsey Gardner Policy Institute to discuss the 2025 city and town population estimates. We're going to hand our time over mostly to the collaborators over at Gardner. But before we do that, I just wanted to go over a couple of housekeeping issues. First, this webinar is being recorded, and we will share the recording with you later. We are also happy to share the slides later. And then Gardner has also generously offered to share their memo detailing the population estimates with the folks signed up for this call after as well, ahead of the full debut tomorrow. So with that, oh, and then sorry, one last point. Since it is a shorter webinar, we aren't going to be answering questions throughout. If you would enter your questions into the chat, we'll keep track of them. At the end, we'll answer what we can. And then if not, both Mallory and Megan have offered to follow up with people on any remaining questions. So Natalie, with that, I'd love to hand the time over to you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Molly, and great to have all of you join us this morning. Happy Monday. I want to thank the League of Cities and Towns for this partnership. You know, at the Kempsey Gardner Policy Institute, we specialize in economic and demographic research, and we've been given the charge to produce city and town estimates, and no better partner than the League to help us in sharing these numbers, in giving context to these numbers, giving you background. And so it's our commitment to today share information with you ahead of the public release. We do this on an embargoed basis, but really happy to share these numbers with you and give you additional information. I want to also thank the Gardner team. Mallory Bateman, Megan Raby, Jennifer Robinson, others on our team have worked really, really hard on these numbers. This is a huge task. As you know, there are many, many cities and unincorporated areas in the state, lots of housing units to keep track of, lots of coordination with the Census Bureau. And I just want Megan, Mallory, and our team to know how much I appreciate their really great work. I'm going to turn the time over to them, but before I do that, let's look at a quick agenda. So I'm saying a few words, and then I'll turn it over to Mallory, who will take us through the rest of the agenda. We want to make sure you understand the Utah Population Committee. This is a statutory committee that you need to understand because they are the actual producers of these numbers. We just staff it. I'll let Mallory give the details on the rest of the agenda. But I did want to mention, if Megan, if you would go to the next slide, I just wanted to give you my top level summary of what you're seeing. This is the first time that the state of Utah has prepared locally produced comprehensive set of city and town estimates using a housing unit method. We did some estimates last year, but did not do it at the housing unit level for every city and town in the state. So this is the first time that that's happening. We've always reviewed these numbers. We've always had a partnership with the Census Bureau, but this is a major step for our state to set up the infrastructure to prepare these estimates with local information and knowledge. We did extensive data validation, and as part of that, we had to look at 110,000 building permits and multiple sources to make sure that the building permits were complete, accurate, and consistent over time and among geographies. We have full documentation, so we are disclosing in complete the methods, the input data, the supporting data sets. We're also local, we're here. And so that is exciting. And I will mention that in the coming year, not this year, but in the coming year, we will implement a review process pre-release of these numbers. So that will be an exciting step in the right direction as well. Important that you understand that these are the numbers we're releasing tomorrow are July 1, 2025, point in time population estimates. And of course, population numbers are constantly in motion with births, deaths, people moving in, people moving out. You also have the added complication of full-time residents versus visitors or seasonal residents. And so we view these estimates as indicative of population change, population growth and decline. But no one should assume that like any given one number captures everything exactly. It's supposed to be an indicative number of relative population growth and decline in our state. So happy to answer more questions about that, but I thought it was important that you know that. So with that, with a lot of enthusiasm, I turn the time over to Mallory to walk through. Mallory directs our demographic research here at the Gardner Institute, and she'll walk you through the committee and some of the details. So take it over, Mallory.
Well, thanks, Natalie. And I want to echo the thanks to Megan and Natalie and Jenny and the Gardner team and the League for their help and collaboration in getting this complete. As Natalie mentioned, we chair and staff the Utah Population Committee, and this group or a version of it has been around in the state since the 1960s. The work came to Gardner in 2015. And you might have seen estimates come out from us at the state and county level since 2015 through this group. It's something that is legislatively mandated. So the structure of the group, it's the data providers and the experts. So we want to just frame it that way. The state and county work uses insights from a lot of different sources. So we have vital statistics, we have births and deaths from Department of Health and Human Services. We also get insights from the State Board of Education for school enrollment. We get insights from the Tax Commission for tax returns, so we can see where people file, one year to the next in an aggregated way. And then we also use building permits there. So this is just highlighting the folks who are on that, the population committee, and we want to thank them as well for their insights and their expertise because they really help develop products that are really useful. One other thing I want to mention with this is that so the state and county, those all come together to be one state number, and these estimates that we're going to talk about today are also a part of that number. So all of the cities and towns and unincorporated areas sum up to the counties that then sum up to the state. So it's all a collective body of work, reflecting usual place of residence for people living in the state of Utah. So if you want to go to the next one, Megan. So you're hearing from us in part. Natalie alluded to this last legislative session. There was a bill called HB 379 that amended some language that made the UPC, Utah Population Committee estimates, the standard source throughout most of state code instead of the census population estimates. We're responding to the ask that was put forth in this legislation. And so we just want to let you know that, we're taking this role very seriously. We're trying very hard to improve and build upon processes that, have been around for decades, but also keep things moving forward in the right direction as we grow and change and continue to experience new things. And if you want to go to the next slide. And so, as Natalie mentioned, this is the first time that we've had a statewide complete data set that's all done using the same methodology. Last year, we had a short period of time to get some state numbers out that were going to be connected in one way or another, but this time around, everything is connected through this Utah Population Committee structure. So those county numbers, the insights that we get from those other data sources around school enrollment and taxes and births and deaths play a role in what you're going to see in your city number as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Megan, who's going to walk you through the process that we use to create these numbers.
All right. So you have now heard both Natalie and Mallory mention this housing unit method. So I'm excited that I get to walk you through what that means. The housing unit method is a widely used approach for small area population estimates. Essentially, the method translates growth in housing units to growth in household population. And there are several components of that. So first, we start with a population base. Block level counts from the 2020 census are the foundation for our estimates. And then we use the July 1st, 2025 municipal boundary file to assign blocks to municipalities. And there are three major results that I really want to talk through regarding that. So first, that means that estimates for the full series are produced for communities that were incorporated during the decade. So for example, Erda and Lake Point are going to get a estimate for the entire time series based off of that July 1st, 2025 municipal boundary file. Second, estimates are not produced or not included for communities that were incorporated after July 1st, 2025. So places like Ogden Valley and Spring Lake, they're going to be included when we create estimates for July 1st, 2026. And then the third thing I want to mention is that estimates may differ from previously published estimates due to new annexations. So for example, you're looking at this screen, you can see Salt Lake County. The areas that are in this patchwork red are areas that have been annexed by a municipality between 2020 and 2025, or I should say between 2020 and July 1st, 2025. So all of those annexations, the populations living in those annexed areas are going to be included with the municipality that annexed that area. So again, this is all going to be representative because of that July 1st, 2025 time point. All right, after we have our population base, we then calculate housing unit change. And we use building permits to inform housing unit growth, and we source our permits from Construction Monitor. Once we have those permits, they are then assigned to blocks based on the address listed in the permit. And that assignment process is called geocoding, and we use the Utah Geospatial Resource Center's geocoder to do that. Next, we use information on construction lags to determine when that building permit turns into an actual housing unit, and those lag times depend on the size of the development. All right, once we have our number of new housing units, we then translate that into new household population based on housing unit tenure, so whether a unit is owned or rented, and occupancy. We then use average household size at the census tract level to create an initial household population estimate. If you aren't familiar with census tracts, these are a little bit like neighborhood size. They're a little bit of a smaller geography, and we use that census tract level specifically to account for variation by geography. So once we apply that, we have our initial household population estimate, and we control that to the Utah Population Committee county estimates. So Mallory just talked about these a little bit, but just to kind of reiterate, the Utah Population Committee creates a county estimate, and that estimate accounts for additional information such as births and deaths, school enrollment, and IRS data. So we want to ensure that our city and town data is consistent with that count that incorporates this additional information. So to do that, we adjust our estimate so that the household population for all cities, towns, and unincorporated areas sum to that county estimate. All right, last piece of the puzzle here is our group quarter population. So we account for people who are living in group quarters, such as college residency halls and skilled nursing facilities. So to do that, we start with the group quarter population at 2020 census levels. But each year we request updated counts from facility administrators, and then we apply that updated count to the number in our model so we can account for changes there. All right, now we get to put it all together. So the model starts with that base count of the household population from the decennial census. It then updates it based on the number of new housing units and that census tract level persons per housing unit. It then adjusts that household population growth to align with county totals before it combines it with our updated group quarter information to create that July 1st, 2025 total population estimate. And this was already mentioned, but I just want to kind of, again, re-note that this July 1st total estimate is a point in time number. It does not include temporary residents, such as folks with secondary homes or folks who are visiting a city or town on vacation. This estimate really is trying to represent the population at their usual residence, which census defines as the place where they live and sleep most of the time. All right, that's how we create our population estimate. But aligned with that is our quality assurance process. Now, there's a lot on this screen. There's a lot that goes into that, but I think it's easiest to think about this as two main overarching processes. So first we have our input data verification, and as Natalie mentioned, we used over 110,000 building permits to create these estimates. So we really wanted to ensure the completeness and accuracy of that input data. So we did lots of things to do that. So first, we identified and filled gaps when we saw that there was missing data. So this happened a little bit for large developments. We saw that some large developments were not included in Construction Monitor. So we got together with our housing experts here at Gardner and were able to get a list of new large developments and validate that against our building permits that we got from Construction Monitor and fill in gaps. We also checked that we had permits from each city, town, and unincorporated area in Utah, and we reached out to communities that we did not have building permit information from, and we got building permits directly from 28 communities. And if you are one of those 28 communities on the line, just want to say thank you so much for doing that. This was such an important part of our model. We really, really care about this. And so we're just really happy and be able to make that connection with you all. Another thing that we did is we have a new process that standardizes address information in order to improve the number of permits that get matched to geography. As I mentioned, that geocoding process. We also conducted these focused reviews for areas that had low geographic match rates, and we made manual adjustments when needed to make sure that every city and town had the best geocoding rate possible. We also did a lot of data cleaning and validation. So we have a process that removes duplicate or ineligible permits, also one that flags anomalies for us to dive deeper into. And then we did targeted reviews of large developments, multifamily housing, and short-term rental markets. So a lot of steps that went into our input data verification. Once we felt we completed all those steps, we then created 289 sub-county estimates, and those went through their own validation process. So we wanted to make sure those estimates were consistent, reasonable, and also aligned with external benchmarks. So we compared all of those estimates against census estimates and also prior year estimates to see their same, different things that we could look into there. We also validated housing unit counts using several different sources when available. So we compared against our Ivory Boyer construction database, some meter information, sometimes county assessor information, and then multiple census data sets. We also compared household size and occupancy rates to ACS, the Census American Community Survey benchmarks, along with reviewed trends over time and natural changes such as birth and death. So lots of steps that went into this process as well to get our final estimates. All right, now I get to share some of the results from you all. So from our estimates, we found that 2025 marked the first year that more than half of Utahns lived in a city with a population of 50,000 or more. Also, between 2024 and 2025, cities with populations between 5 and 20,000 experienced fastest average growth at about 1.5%. Just as a comparison point, the state of Utah at the same time had a growth rate of 1.3%. Also between 2024 and 2025, 172 communities gained residents. That's a little bit more than what we saw in the year prior when there were 151 communities gaining residents. All right, this table shows the top 10 communities in Utah with largest population growth between 2024 and 2025. So on this list, half of the places are from Utah County, 2 are in Salt Lake County, 2 are in Washington County, and 1 is in Tooele County. Those findings are in our fact sheet that we're going to be releasing tomorrow, but we have kind of a whole slew of products that we're going to be publishing. So first, we're going to be publishing a table that includes the total population for each place for all years in the time series. If you're looking for additional information, we are also publishing a data set that's going to include other variables that you can look at, or if you have a web application or do some coding, it's a little bit easier to pull it in that way. I already mentioned the fact sheet that's going to contain tables and results, particularly looking at by community size. And we're also releasing a methodology user guide, and this is going to go through more of the details that I mentioned today about our housing unit method and all of the inputs that go into our model. We really want this to be a useful product for folks, and so if you're reading through it and something is confusing or if you have questions, definitely feel free to reach out to us. Like I said, we really want to be able to show and explain all the information that goes into creating these estimates. And then if you do not want to open anything, there's also going to be an interactive on our website that allows users just to click on the city or town that you're interested in and then find your number that way. All right, all this is going to be on our website, gardner.utah.edu. You're going to want to go to the demographics tab and then head down to the sub-county area, and you'll be able to find all of the products I just mentioned on that page. All right, last thing I want to do here is walk through some frequently asked questions. So first, what data will be available for my community? So as mentioned, we're going to have that total population number. But along with that, if you look at our data set, we are also going to have an estimate for the population living in households, the population living in group quarters, and the total number of housing units. Along with that estimate, we are also including in our data set a absolute difference, which is going to be the difference between the year's point in time and the prior year's point in time, along with a percent difference. And when I talk about year point in time, I am referring to any year in our time series here between 2020 and 2025. So it's going to be the whole series of numbers that are being published. All right, why do the estimates look different this year? So there are a couple of reasons why that might be the case, depending on your situation. So first, if your community is outside the Wasatch Front, you're going to see a difference because of this switch in series. Last year, you would have seen a adjusted Census Bureau estimate for your area. This year, as mentioned, we are able to produce this statewide estimate process using our housing unit method. And so you're going to see this difference because of the change from that adjusted Census Bureau estimate to a statewide housing unit method estimate. Another reason why you might see a difference in your estimate is due to annexations. So particularly if you're in the Wasatch Front and you have an estimate last year from 2024, but say your city or town had an annexation in April 1st of 2025, your estimate is going to reflect that annexation for the entire time series. So your 2024 number is also going to reflect the new boundary. And so everything is going to look a little different because of those annexations. Now, if number 1 and 2 are not applicable for you and you see a difference in your number, it'll be because of a processing improvement. So as I mentioned through our quality assurance process, we have several new steps in place that allow us to include more building permits in our model than ever before. And it's possible that if you're seeing a difference in your number, that it was due to this quality assurance process that allowed us to account for additional unit information. All right, next one. So how do census and Utah Population Committee sub-county estimates differ? So our process and census's process is actually fairly similar. We both use a housing unit model. We both start from the 2020 census, but there are some key differences. So first, we have different sources for building permits. So we source our building permits from Construction Monitor, but Census gets their building permits from the Census Building Permit Survey. So that accounts for one difference. We also have different model inputs. So, for example, we have this construction lag that varies based off of development size. So, for example, a development with 100 units will take 12 months in our model to be fully complete. For Census Bureau, it'll take 6 months. So, that is like one model input that will have an impact on the difference in estimates. We also have slightly different quality assurance steps. So, the Census Bureau produces high quality estimates, but they have to produce estimates for the entire country. Because of our more limited scope, we get to do more digging into the data, more quality assurance steps. And so, for example, we can maybe we see a building permit for a development with 500 units. We can then check to make sure that, okay, 500 is the right number of units, it is placed in the right location, and it was in fact completed by the July 1st date. An additional reason why and how the census and UPC estimates differ is the municipal boundary file. So census uses a municipal boundary file as of January 1st of the year. So their estimates this year when they come out will reflect January 1, 2025, where our estimates reflect, as I keep saying, that July 1st, 2025 number. So there's a 6 months different there in the municipal boundaries being used. All right, last one. How can communities be involved in their estimates? So communities should continue to submit their building permits to the following three entities. So one, Construction Monitor. That again is the source that we use for building permits. The Ivory Boyer database, that is the source for the permits that are used for the county estimate, which then impacts the sub-county estimate. And then the Census Building Permit Survey, this is the source for the Census Bureau's estimate. So three places where to be involved would be great for communities to continue to submit their building permit information to. All right, that brings me to the end of the information that I have to share. I know we're at 10:59, but I will swing it back over to Natalie if you have any finishing thoughts, or Molly if you have anything else you'd like
Yeah.
to say before closing out.
Yeah, thanks, Megan, and thanks all of the city representatives in the league. Mallory, thanks for your leadership on this. I hope this has been helpful. Again, tomorrow we will release these numbers. We're doing a media roundtable in the morning, and my understanding, and Molly can weigh in here if she needs to, or Carson, but we will be distributing all of the numbers on an embargoed basis to all of you later today. So with that, I'll turn it back over to the league if the league wants to close us out.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Natalie, Mallory, everyone for taking the time and especially for walking us through that entire process, Megan. That was really insightful to better understand how the numbers come to be. Just as Natalie said, and as it is in the chat, we will be sharing both the recording of this, the slides, as well as the embargoed data with folks later. Well, it takes us a while to process the video, but once we get everything processed and ready to share, we will share it with everyone who signed up. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. We are launching into our kind of webinar season of training. So if you think of any topics that you think would be helpful for us to cover, similar to what we did today, either solo as the league or in collaboration with another entity, please let us know. And with that, we'll end. Oh, it just turned to 11:01. I was going to say we'll end right on time, but we'll end a minute late. Thanks for your time, and please feel free to follow up if there's any remaining questions.